I think that the upside is enormous. And even if you pay $100,000, if I'm right on the numbers, and I believe that I will be, then you still have tremendous upside. So that's really going to be okay. So people will come into this in the course of the next few years. I think this will be the first mainstream bull market. And there's a good chance that, like that first big bull market you had early on, not the one in 2016 and 2017, that this will be quite surprising to where it goes, because there's a global tsunami of money that's going to start coming into Bitcoin. It's going to come in as a trickle. Everything in economics seems to be gradually, then suddenly. That's how markets tend to work. Gradually, then suddenly. And that gradually takes a while. Exponential curves look linear in the early stages. That's the gradually part. They hit a critical point and then suddenly happens. And I think Bitcoin will be no different. And I think we'll go through a series of these things. And I think the next year, 2, 3, possibly 4 years are quite shocking. Take us to numbers that are really quite crazy. I have said for a long time, all surprises in Bitcoin will be on the upside.
All right. Welcome back, everybody, to Altcoin Daily. My name is Aaron. Of course, the reason you subscribe to this channel is for our daily videos. I keep you informed on a daily basis on everything going on in the space today. What you just listened to was a man known as Bitcoin Tina. That's an acronym. He was with Marty Bent on the Tales from the Crypt podcast. And in this episode, he basically talks about everything that is bullish for Bitcoin this cycle that's vastly different from the past Bitcoin cycles. So this is a podcast that I really like. I like to support these guys, and I wanted to recommend this episode specifically to you. So in this episode, for over 60 minutes straight, Bitcoin Tina, for 60 minutes, goes into great detail and reasoning as to why, basically just why for the next several years he is so bullish on Bitcoin. So I'm going to play you a few clips. Do yourself a favor. You need to listen to the whole episode. And this information is just too good not to share. So anyways, in the opening clip, you heard Bitcoin Tina say that the upside for this cycle is so enormous that even if you end up paying $100,000 for your Bitcoin sometime in the next few years, Bitcoin at $100,000 is still going to be a good buy because it still has tremendous upside, according to him. And he goes into details about specific macro events happening in the world today. So he does some reasoning. We're going to skip that mostly because we've talked about this stuff on the channel before. But most notably, he says that something that's very different this time around is the money printing that just really got ramped up near the beginning of this year. You know, the inflation, the cheap money. And with money being so cheap, Bitcoin will become the ideal asset to own. And if Bitcoin truly is the ideal asset to own in the 2020s and $100,000 Bitcoin is still a good buy, the question is, at what price can we expect Bitcoin to top out in the coming years? Listen.
For the 2020s. And I think this is a really interesting kickoff. And this really started with a bang right in January of 2020. And I think, and have thought for a while, that 2020s are going to be a truly spectacular decade. I would not be surprised to see Bitcoin up in the $3 to $5 million range by 2030, somewhere between 2028 and 2032. So my guess is a 300 to 500x return from $10,000. It'd be higher from $7,000. I think the numbers will be absolutely spectacular. And I think
today's
we're
dollars,
talking about something really insane. What's
that? $5 to $8 million in today's dollars.
3 to 5 million.
3 to 5.
You bid me up, Marty. Yes, I think in today's buying power. I think if you have a very aggressive inflation, the numbers will just be whatever. No, I think in today's buying power, if you had one Bitcoin today, it'll buy you what $3 million would buy you today. That's what's going to happen to the value of that, or $5 million, what it buys you today.
Wow. $3 to $5 million Bitcoin sometime between the years 2028 and 2032. That's what we're talking about. Of course, not financial advice. Nobody knows the future. This is just this guy's opinion. But that's what makes Bitcoin such an interesting investment, right? It's that asymmetrical upside potential. Asymmetrical upside. If you bought one Bitcoin today, not that you have to buy a whole Bitcoin, but let's just say you bought one whole Bitcoin at $10,000. At worst, you could end up losing $10,000, but at best, we have that asymmetrical upside potential, meaning that with that $10,000, you could profit with a 10x, 20x, or as Bitcoin Tino is saying, by 2030, you could be seeing a 300 to 500x. And I also like what he went on to say. He went on to say how it is his opinion that a lot of the OGs who are still holding on to their Bitcoin today, the whales, the Bitcoin whales, he thinks that a lot of those whales will end up selling off a lot of their Bitcoin just because, well, he'll explain it, but it's really just because they don't have a long-term time preference. Listen.
I think it becomes the ideal thing to own, which means if you have 10 Bitcoin, you're talking about being like a small whale. And if you have 100 Bitcoin, you are a whale. And I think a lot of the OGs, a lot of them, I think, will lose their Bitcoin along the way, which I'm really happy about, because I think many of them underestimate the asset that they have. They've held it, what for them feels like so long. They're like all nervous. You're not using this as a medium of exchange yet. And oh my God, it's not going to really work out. You got to push it for a medium of exchange. They feel like this 11 years is like this eternity. And I look at the 11 years like it's nothing. And the thing grew from zero to today. What are we at? 170, 180? Where are we today? Market cap.
Probably like 165 to 175 billion, I would imagine.
So
somewhere in that range.
That's enormous. And I think, it's going to grow exponentially in this decade, in my opinion. Will the return be as big as from 0 to 160 billion? No. I mean, but in absolute dollars, the numbers are going to be off the charts spectacular. And it's going to be really big, really huge money. And everything's pushing it that way.
Everything is pushing it that way. So he gets into so much specifics and detail. So some of the stuff that I'm skipping, he talks about the halving, talks about, the turmoil around the globe, sanctions, talks about how just generally speaking, trust and awareness for Bitcoin are increasing. People's level of not only education about what's happening in the world and with their governments, that's greater today. People's education on just what makes Bitcoin special is greater today. And the fact that, on-ramps are being created, basically anything that could make Bitcoin's number go up, even regulations, is good for Bitcoin.
Anything which promotes number go up and enables people to come into Bitcoin is a positive. So even though regulation, so think about this, regulation means you're not banning it. If you're regulating it, you don't ban it. If you're going to ban it, you ban it. You don't regulate it to ban it, because you just ban it. So regulation is positive. It's not negative. Regulation enables people who look at this and say, I don't want to buy Bitcoin because the governments are going to ban it. You say, well, dummy, they just regulated it. So they're obviously not banning it. So you can now invest in this thing. You can be comfortable. This is just like what you're comfortable with. So when you can say to people who have a lot more money than we do, guys who may be in my age of people, that this is regulated and you can feel comfortable owning this, they watch it going up. What are they going to do? They're going to buy it, and they're going to help drive the price higher.
So we really are in a unique time in history, guys. I think we're going to look back at this time in 2020 before the third halving, and last year, 2019, and even going, a little bit after the halving, finishing out 2020. I think we're going to look back at this time in history and wish that we had stacked a few more Satoshis. If I felt this way about an altcoin, I'd tell you, I'd be the first to say, I think this altcoin will stand the test of time. But the reality is we see money flowing in and out of altcoins all the time, in and out. The only coin that we see money continuing to flow into is Bitcoin. And that's been true for 11 years, and we'll see how that holds up. But either way, guys, this is going to be a good year. I think I'm going to buy a little bit more Bitcoin. And if you're new here, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you like the video. This is a great video to share with a friend. And make sure you watch that whole episode with Bitcoin Tina, because if you think I, took out only the bullish stuff, believe me, the whole episode is bullish. You got to watch the whole thing. Either way, guys, see you tomorrow.